an owner was asking about replacement ignition lock sets, and I thought about taking some pictures to explain what he would encounter, but I think a video would probably be a little more explanatory. What I've got here is a genuine Rover lock set, and then one of the made in China replicas. These are getting harder and harder to find, the genuine Rovers, but if you manage to find one, that's the part number. That's the part number there. And this particular made in China, that's the part number that it came under. The made in Chinas will work, but you've got to make some modifications to use them. The genuine Rovers are plug and play. You just stick them in and connect up your ignition switch and you're off to the races. The made in Chinas have additional material around the boss that sticks up in the column for the lock. And this material will prevent the column from seating in the saddle, and it needs to be removed. There's an opening in the column that this boss fits up into. So on my made in China, I just removed material. I just kept removing, test fitting, till I had eventually removed enough that it went into the column, seated itself properly. And it wasn't the end of the world, but it did take, some time. It was an additional step. And I used a combination of a Dremel and files, and I'll put this on the car so you can actually see it in action. I was able to remove enough material that it fits. In the process, I did expose the end of the tumbler. You'll notice that the Rover housing, where the tumbler goes, is all the way out to here, but the made in China housing is only to here. And this seems to be a very common shape for the Chinese replicas that you'll find out there. And what that means, obviously, is that when you install these, our decorative surround around the steering column comes to about here. So the made in China replica, the tumbler will be recessed. You'll reach in with the key versus having the end of that exposed like it is on our cars. The tumbler still works, and this will not be exposed when it's seated against the column. When you actually install it in the column covers that up, so it's not like that end of the tumbler there would be exposed. But there's obviously just less meat here. I mean, the end of the tumbler for the Rover unit is going to be somewhere in here, so this is all just solid metal, whereas the Chinese unit, the end of the tumbler is here, and that's why when I was removing material, it ended up exposing it. And that's why you have probably the big weight difference. This unit's much heavier than this unit, so it obviously has more metal in it. I thought about, could you take the Chinese tumbler assembly and put it into your original housing? I haven't tried that because there's really no reason for me to try it. I have multiples of the originals. One thing I did notice, this is the pin that holds the tumbler assembly in. You drive that pin out and then you can pull the tumbler assembly out. I believe that screw there serves the same purpose on the Chinese replica, but you'll notice that they're not in the same place. I don't know if that would indicate some significant differences in the actual tumbler assembly or not, but you would probably, even if the Chinese tumbler assembly fit and operated the steering wheel lock, you'd have to make some sort of a modification to get the lock pin to operate. The end where the switch goes is identical. That's not an issue. So you can put the actual electrical switch on either one, no problem. But if you're going to use one of the made in China replicas, you'll probably end up removing the additional material, so that way it'll fit up against the column, and then you'll end up with the tumbler being recessed into the decorative housing rather than protruding out of it. But let me stick this on the car, and then you can actually see it in action. Here is the Chinese lock set installed. By removing the material that I showed you, it does fit up tight against the column, and the steering wheel is locked. The electrical portion attaches right up, no problem. So let me put the surround on, and you can see what the difference is in the protrusion of the tumbler assembly. And this is what it looks like with the decorative surround in place. As I mentioned, the tumbler does not protrude from the decorative housing, but is recessed. So you reach in with the key, but once you do that, you know, it operates the electrical portion of the switch normally, and it's functionally able to operate the car properly. And when you pull the key out, it does lock the steering wheel, just like the original. So the made in China lock sets are a suitable replacement, but they're not plug and play. You do have to remove the material that I showed you around the lock boss, and you do end up with a lock set that is recessed rather than protruding from the housing. And I guess the final caveat would be general overall made in China quality concerns. But if you have a non-functioning lock set and made in China is your only alternative, they are usable.